Welcome to the meeting room. I'm Holly Patrick.
And I'm Paul Harvey.
And we're joined by our colleague James Lancaster, here to talk about a survey that suggests event professionals love working from home and hate going into the office. But before we get into that, a short video from our sponsors, IHG Hotels and Resorts.
At IHG Hotels and Resorts, we're in the business of you.
We're here to help you plug in,
connect and recharge,
make an impression,
and meet with confidence.
With 19 brands built for business,
your business gets even more rewarding.
With an award-winning loyalty program at 6,000 IHG hotels and resorts worldwide.
So, James, I was joking when I said that event professionals hate going into the office, but I'm not too far off the mark with that, am I?
No, you're not. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, as you can imagine, but the headline figure is pretty much that. Just to step back a bit to explain why we did this survey. So Northstar carried out some first look research into hybrid working and the effect it's having on the events industry. And this was really to inform a conversation that's been rumbling on and on and on since the pandemic. You know, you hear it whispered wherever you go out for an event meeting about the impact of people working from home. But there's no data behind any of these conversations. It was all anecdotal. So the conversation was taking place in the dark, really. So we really wanted to provide some stats to back up people's claims about hybrid working. And clearly there was a hunger for that because the survey attracted 358 respondents, which is an awful lot for this industry. And as you alluded to in your intro there, yeah, it's pretty emphatic that the shift to hybrid working that happened during the pandemic is a permanent one. Of the 30% of employers who made the switch to hybrid working during the pandemic, only 6% have gone back to the office full time.
So what does the split look like in terms of who's working where?
Yeah, well, as I said, so 358 people took part in this survey, and I guess a lot of those were employers, a lot of them were sole traders, but the results are that 60% are now working on a hybrid model, so that's they're working some days in the office, some days from home. Over a quarter are working purely remotely, so I guess that's the one-man bands, as I said, the sole traders, people who work from home. And just over 1 in 10 are now working that 9 to 5 days in the office, humdrum routine. Now, I suppose the interesting thing looking forward is to what extent that 13% is going to grow, whether more and more people will start to go back to the office, whether it will stay about the same, or whether actually fewer people will be going to the office in 5-10 years' time. That's something we have to keep an eye on.
And does the survey give us any clues towards what's going to happen with that?
I think it does. You have to read between the lines maybe a bit. 8% of employers want to increase the amount of time their workers are back in the office. But that is kind of counterbalanced by the fact that 6% said they'd had pushback from employers. 6% had actually said that they'd had staff members who would threaten to leave should that return to office be enforced, which is really interesting because it shows a kind of that there's real people power behind this now, actually. And the experience of employers is that they may be trying to get people back to the office, but if there's resistance there, it's actually very difficult to do that.
So why do you think this shift to remote working has stuck?
That's a good question. I think, without sounding sort of flippant about it, I think it's because people like it. I think ultimately it's because people like it. And when people like something and they get used to it, as they did in the pandemic, it's actually very hard to get people to do something else, particularly if the results aren't, the results aren't a problem, if people are working just as hard as they ever were. When we asked what motivates people to work from home as opposed to going to the office, the results there were quite interesting. I think it's generally assumed that work from home is about saving money on the commute. And people who work within, 20, 30 minutes of London, that can really rack up. You know, I used to live in Brighton, and the commute to, I think it was London Bridge from Brighton, I think it's like £3,500 a year. Yeah. So I think that was always assumed that people were basically saving money. But our survey showed that actually that wasn't even in the top 3 concerns of event professionals. The top concern was saving time on the commute. Now, you might say time is money, they're saving. But I don't think people work that hard at 8 o'clock in the morning. But yeah, that was a top concern, saving time. Followed, and this kind of ties in with it really, was this idea of making life administration easier. So I think this is all about work-life balance in a way. So if you're having to do a bit of, I don't know, banking or go to the post office or school run, I guess is a big one. It's just that much easier if you're working from home. The third reason, and let me consult my notes, the third reason why people were staying at home was because, and this is interesting from an employer perspective, is because people just prefer their environment at home. It's quieter, nicer.
You got all your own stuff, basically.
You've got all your own stuff. You can listen to your own music without it bothering anybody. So that's something that employers might think about. And I think employers are thinking about that. You know, if you look in job specs now, it's all kind of, we have a coffee machine, we have a fuzzball table, we have all that kind of stuff. They're trying to make the office environment as comfortable and as home-like as possible, perhaps in response to what we're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. But nothing can really beat or replicate your own home. So it's great that we like working from home and that's being acknowledged. But what does that do to productivity? What did the survey come up with in terms of, are we actually all sat at home in our pajamas? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, I've worked from home for the last 8 years. And as you know, I don't hang around in my pajamas all day. Not all day.
Not all day, no.
So I take issue with that stereotype anyway and that caricature. But I've always felt that the productivity argument was a little bit bogus nowadays, especially when we're talking about jobs that loosely fall into that knowledge economy bracket, you know, creative industries, you know, where people are basically plugged into their laptops all day. They don't need to be anywhere physically. We're not working in factories anymore. People are working in factories. I'm talking about ourselves. So that idea of productivity falling just because you're at home never really rang true with me. And that is reflected in the survey. So 58% of people said that they felt their own productivity had improved since hybrid working had increased. And 32% said it made no difference. So if you're an employer, that's fine, it makes no difference. And only 10%, or 9 point whatever, said that they felt that their productivity had declined as a result of hybrid working. Now, I suppose that question works both ways. I mean, you could be talking about other people working from home affects your productivity, or whether you personally find it more difficult to work at home. But I suspect a lot of this is just down to personality type, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
So productivity's up. There must be some drawbacks to working from home, though. What about company culture? What effect has it had on company culture? It can't be good for that, right?
You would think not. But I think maybe when you talk about company culture, who defines what company culture is? That's an interesting question. I think there's a traditional idea of company culture, which is kind of top down, and managers want to see people sort of team working in person and sort of. But again, and this sounds horribly loaded, this survey now, honestly, these are the true results. We found that 70% of respondents said the increase in hybrid working had improved what they regard as company culture. So that's a huge amount who say that their sense of getting on with their colleagues has improved since they're not seeing quite as much of them in person. And I think that might actually have something to do with it, right? So we don't see each other often face to face, and that's why we like each other. Because when we do see each other, it's quite nice, yeah? And we see each other for a reason and a purpose. We go into the office for events like this. We come into London for this kind of thing. Or we go into the office for team building or strategizing, and there's more of a purpose. So when we get there, we're not just locked into our own little worlds anyway. We're talking to each other. So that might be significant. But yeah, again, it's very positive. People are responded to this survey in a very positive way.
Being cynical about it, though, like you say, people like working from home. So they're going to say, oh, yeah, no, company culture's improved and productivity's improved.
Yeah, there is that. The whole thing's probably loaded, yeah. But you have to be, that's why you have to sort of read between the lines a bit in these surveys. I didn't mention that the sweet spot for hybrid working was 2 to 3 days a week. So that whole trope around Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I won't mention the acronym, but that is borne out by this survey. So most people were working 2 days in the office, followed by 3 days, and then there was a sharp drop off to any more than 2 or 3 days, which was interesting. Yeah.
I love that the hybrid workforce are reclaiming what company culture means. I think that's really positive and really important. So are we saying that this survey demonstrates that hybrid working is wholly positive? There's no drawbacks at all?
No, I don't think so. I think if you look at the survey in a bit more depth, and again, with surveys, you have to read between the lines because all you get is data. And that's not really, it's not qualitative, it's quantitative. But there are clearly some drawbacks. I think training and onboarding new staff is a real issue for people. Not hiring, funny enough. Hiring was fine. But training people coming in to a business, especially if that person doesn't, and sort of introducing them to their colleagues if they're all working from home. And we all have that round robin, say hello to so-and-so. Well, okay, it's not quite the same as seeing someone face-to-face. So that is clearly an issue. I think access to technology. So our home offices might be nicer than going into the office, but do we have the right equipment? Is it always there? Fax machines, how old am I? Printers, that kind of thing. Most people don't have high quality office equipment in their homes, so that was a problem. And I think another thing is maybe when it comes to strategy meetings and you might be able to talk tactically over Teams and Slack, but when it comes to a 5-year plan, sound like Joseph Stalin, some kind of long-term strategy, then you clearly have to get into the office and talk to your colleagues face-to-face. So there's a drawback there in that if you want to really get some proper strategy work done, the office is probably not the best place for it.
Well, it's absolutely fascinating stuff, all the report. Thank you very much for sharing the results with us. If people want to download the report, where on earth can they find it?
They can find it. And just to say, the report goes into more detail about the impact on the industry at large. So we've spoken about the effects on the individual, but the report readers ask questions about the meetings industry at large. But they can find it at amimagazine.global, or you're the M&IT guys.
mitmagazine.co.uk.
Under the resources tab on each of those websites, or in the link below this episode.
That's all from the meeting room, and we will finish on another short video from our sponsors, IHG Hotels and Resorts.
At IHG Hotels and Resorts, we're in the business of you.
We're here to help you plug in,
Connect and recharge.
Make an impression. And meet with confidence.
With 19 brands built for business,
Your business gets even more rewarding.
With an award-winning loyalty program at 6,000 IHG hotels and resorts worldwide.